Now, finally, then, kind of zooming in a little bit on, what's important in Australia in the landscape here. What do companies need to be aware of? The first one is, as I flagged a few times now, is that Australian sustainability reporting standards. There's two components there. There's a bill that's passing through Parliament. Once that is done, then it's official. But at the same time, they're the actual reporting standards that we're waiting for. Now, there was what I call an exposure draft, EDSR1, that was issued by the AASB. And the feedback on that was that the main component that's really important is that the ASRS, the standards that we'll be reporting on, we really want that to be aligned with where they originate from, which is the IFRS Sustainability Disclosure Standards, and make sure that they're aligned as closely as possible. No one is waiting for Australia taking those international standards and then kind of watering them down or changing them to the degree that if you report on the Australian standards, you don't match up with the international standards. And if for some reason, you need to do that in a different jurisdiction, you keep reporting for different jurisdictions. So ideally, we want to end up in a place where the ASRS, if you report on that, you're effectively also reporting on the IFRS Sustainability Disclosure Standards. We're waiting for them to be issued in August. And what we'll likely see is, but hopefully, carbon copy as close as possible. IFRS S1 will become ASRS S1, the general requirements for sustainability reporting. It is effectively a requirement to do materiality assessment and disclose on those material topics. So we looked at that early in the presentation. In Australia, it's likely that initially will be a voluntary standard. So it will be there, it will be issued, but you don't have to do that every year from a compliance perspective. Like I said, from a strategic perspective, it's a very smart thing to do. If we look then at IFRS S2, which is the first more like topical standard that was issued by the IFRS, that will become ASRS S2, and that is about climate disclosures. That is the one that is likely going to be mandatory in Australia, and that is the effective implementation of TCFD. So it requires very similar reporting to TCFD. So what you can do is a gap analysis if you're already doing TCFD, and just look at IFRS S2 or ASRS S2 once it's issued, and just do that mapping and see where are my gaps. If I've done TCFD, what do I need to do in addition here? Likely it's not a lot in addition, but it's really important to look at that. So this is the main kind of legislation coming in. Two standards there. We know that the IFRS internationally are building their S3 and their S4. There will be on workforce and biodiversity and nature. So all those things will be coming later as well. Then finally, and this might be less relevant to Australian companies, but it is quite important to touch upon. Globally, you could say that the European Union is the standard setter, the front runner on sustainability in terms of legislation in particular, but also in terms of actually implementing and doing it. Their CSRD, their Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, is requiring the first reporting over 2025. So a lot of companies have already issued a first trial report to work their way through it. CSRD reporting now shows from those first reports that it's 2 to 3 times more effort and time that goes into it. So it's a lot of work. How is this relevant to Australian companies? Well, it might be the different thresholds there and requirements there. You see I've highlighted in yellow here that there are companies, parent companies from third countries that if they tick the boxes here on what's required there, they might be affected by CSRD reporting as well. So if you're not a smaller, just Australian-based company, if you have an international presence, you have a presence in the EU or related to the EU, it's really important to look at this and really go line by line through, am I affected by this potentially? If so, what is the timeline? Now, there's 2 key things around this. CSRD requires you to run that materiality assessment, a double materiality assessment every year. So you have to do it. It's the starting point. You have to go through that process. So it is mandated. And the final component here is that it's really now taking sustainability reporting from let's say a marketing exercise where, if you know a sustainability report with some case studies and photos and the school you build in the community and, a few token disclosures to non-financial disclosures. everything needs to be assured. It's no longer pretty pictures. It's really disclosures that go deep and far. And you really need to collect a lot of data. And it is going to be part of your annual report. It's going to sit in there. It's going to be assured. And it needs to be on par with financial reporting. So I think we're going to see a very different type of report going forward, a lot more like a financial report, more text heavy, data heavy, less pretty pictures. And initially will be a lot more work to do that properly. But once every company is getting a hang of that, we will see that it will be streamlined and just become business as usual at the end of the year.